What would you do if your own mother told you to take an Uber home? After brain surgery? 17 relatives ignored her cry for help until the moment they saw who showed up instead. At her sister's wedding, in front of 200 guests, the truth exploded like a bomb. Secrets revealed, reputations shattered, and one woman finally took back her power. Stay with me because the ending will leave you breathless. My name is Olivia Bennett, and I'm 34. The afternoon light at Houston's airport was the color of weak tea, thin, tired, and a little bitter when I opened the family group chat and typed with fingers that trembled from anesthesia. My flight lands in Seattle at 1 p.m. Can someone pick me up? I just had surgery and can't drive. I watched the 3 dots appear, linger like hope, and disappear like lies. Mom's reply came first. We're too busy today. Just take an Uber. Then my sister Madison Clark. Why don't you ever plan ahead? Aunt Valerie. It's Saturday, honey. Uncle Richard. Working. Hannah Brooks. The kids have soccer. 17 relatives in that chat. 17 people within 30 minutes of SeaTac. 17 ways to say you don't matter. I stared at the screen as if my silence could pull out a shred of compassion. Instead, Madison posted a photo of wedding centerpieces, roses or peonies, a poll that sparked a flood of excitement. Suddenly, everyone had paragraphs about flowers. No one had a sentence for my brain. I typed back a single word, okay. The plastic discharge bracelet rubbed against my wrist as I pocketed my phone. My paperwork crinkled in my lap, my vision spared, the tumor gone. Doctor. Stephen Cole had said the meningioma was pressing on my optic nerve like a thumb holding a door shut. He'd opened the door. I could see. And yet I had never felt so invisible. 3 months earlier, headaches had rolled in like distant thunder. I blamed 12-hour shifts in pediatric oncology, fluorescent lights, the shrill alarms of monitors, the steady ache of parents trying to be brave for children. When my vision smeared during an IV insertion on a 6-year-old named Grace Turner, I knew it wasn't just fatigue. The MRI showed a shadow. Benign, they said, as if that word erased the knife hovering over my sight. Seattle referred me to Houston. You'll need someone with you, Dr. Cole warned. I lied, I will. The truth was, I had no one. Not the kind who shows up when you don't have to beg. Mom liked to call me, our patient one, at brunches. The way some people say, our problem child. With a smile. Madison was the golden daughter promotions, flawless Instagram shots, a wedding to Ethan Ward on the horizon. I was the nurse who, settled, the divorced one who hadn't fought for alimony because I was too tired to battle. I drove Madison to the airport at 4 a.m. for her honeymoon, built furniture for Mom's condo, and transferred over $15,000 across the years, 5 for Madison's emergency Cabo trip after her divorce, 10 for her wedding deposit when Ethan's money was tied up. Family helps family, Mom always said. It was a one-way street. Houston proved silence can be heavy. For 2 weeks, I lay in that hospital room while daylight stretched and shrank across the blinds. The nurses ate lunch with me so I wouldn't be alone. Isabella Lopez held my hand one night after her shift. "Where's your family, Carino?" she asked. Her voice soft but steady. "They're busy," I whispered, an excuse polished smooth from overuse. She squeezed once, firm, like a lighthouse pulse. "Then we'll be your family until you go home." On the day of surgery, fear rose like floodwater. In pre-op, I broke down during a call from Donna Hughes, my supervisor back in Seattle. "You're the one who sits with dying children at 3 a.m., Olivia," she said. "Let someone sit with you." But Mom's Facebook post kept echoing. "So proud of my successful daughter Madison," someone commented about me. Mom answered, "Olivia's fine. She's in healthcare. Not Olivia leads the pediatric oncology nurses. Not Olivia saves lives while losing sleep. Just fine." They wheeled me under lights that buzzed like bees. Dr. Cole leaned close. "The only person you owe today is yourself," he said. I tried to believe him as the world went black. 2 weeks later, Houston discharged me into the harsh glare of an airport. My incision throbbed with every step, the edges of sound muffled by cotton-thick pain. I sent the text. The chat confirmed what I'd always known. I was an afterthought. even to people who shared my blood. A flight attendant noticed my bracelet. "Is someone meeting you in Seattle, sweetheart?" she asked. "Yes." I lied again. "Someone island." Lash. On the plane, I dozed through pockets of pain and memory. The times I was first to show up and last to leave. The dinners I skipped because I couldn't afford to host in return a quiet tax for being the family's ATM. Grace's crayon drawing tucked in my bag. 2 stick figures, one labeled Miss Olivia, the other my hero. When we descended, I powered on my phone. 43 new messages in the family chat, still debating linens and entree choices. Not a single "how are you feeling?" My request for help sat there like a fossil. Proof of life, proof no one cared to look. We touched down at 12:58 p.m. Seattle light is colder than Houston's sharp, honest. I walked slowly, each step deliberate. Baggage claim hummed its mechanical song. Travelers lunged for suitcases as if possession meant permanence. Then I saw him. A tall man in a navy suit stood by the escalator, holding a sheet of printer paper with my name in bold marker. Olivia Bennett. His face was familiar from hospital newsletters. Andrew Miller, CEO of Street Mary's health system, my boss's boss's boss, a man whose calendar moved governors. A man who should have been in a glass-walled boardroom, not at Carousel 4 with a hand-drawn sign and a patient smile. For a heartbeat, I thought I was hallucinating. Then he lifted the paper a little higher, just to be sure I saw him. Before I tell you what Andrew Miller said to me in that indifferent afternoon, you need to understand something. Sometimes the cruelest thing a family can do is not strike, but turn away. And sometimes the kindest thing a stranger can do is simply show up. I gripped the handle of my carry-on. Somewhere behind me, my phone pinged again. "Roses are timeless," Mom had typed. I walked toward the man holding my name. The thing about being the family's disappointment is that it becomes your identity long before you realize it's happening. In the Bennett household, roles were assigned early like characters in a play. Madison Clark was the golden daughter, the flawless star who married well and flaunted her ring like a medal. I was the cautionary tale. At brunches, Mom would smile for her friends and say, "Madison just got another promotion." And then, almost as an afterthought, "And Olivia? Well, Olivia's still at the hospital." The word hospital rolled off her tongue not like a profession, but like a prison sentence. I remember family dinners where Madison sat at the main table with Ethan and whichever business partners happened to drop by. I, at 30 years old, was still relegated to the kids' table. "We need room for the real couples," Mom explained with a breezy laugh, as if dismissing me from my own family's celebration was nothing more than seating logistics. I had poured years into becoming head nurse of my unit, mastering the chaos of pediatric oncology where alarms and tears never stop. Yet at home, I was introduced as the single sister who couldn't keep a man. When my marriage collapsed, my husband running off with a woman from his CrossFit gym, Mom only sighed and said, "You were always too soft, Olivia." Madison would never let a man walk all over her. What she didn't know, or maybe didn't care to admit, was that Madison's first marriage ended in betrayal to her own. But Madison controlled the narrative, while I was too drained to fight back. And why would I? In our family, truth never mattered. Image did. The financial part was even worse. Over the years, I had lent Madison more than $15,000. $5,000 for her emergency Cabo vacation after her divorce. $10,000 for the lavish wedding she was planning with Ethan Ward. Each time, Mom's refrain was the same. "It's what family does. Madison would do the same for you." Except she never did. Because I never asked. Not once. Not for money, not for time, not even for a simple ride after brain surgery. 2 years ago, when my ex-husband cleaned out our joint account, I'd swallowed my pride and asked Mom for just $500 to cover rent. Her reply was sharp and merciless. "Maybe this will finally teach you to be more careful with men." So when I typed that message in the group chat, "My flight lands at 1 p.m. Can someone pick me up?" I already knew the script. I knew the replies would come in, lined up like a row of sharpened knives, each cloaked as practicality. Busy, working, can't today. What I hadn't expected was the speed, the precision with which they dismissed me. It was as though they'd been rehearsing my rejection all their lives. I sat in the Houston terminal clutching my discharge papers, my head pounding in sync with my heartbeat, replaying the pattern I had lived for decades. When I was 8, Madison got a new bike with pink streamers. I inherited her old one, its chain rusted and seat torn. Be grateful, Mom told me. You don't need fancy things. At 12, Madison's science project accidentally became a family collaboration. Dad built the model, Mom wrote the report. Madison smiled as the teacher praised her brilliance. My volcano, built from cardboard and vinegar, sat ignored on the counter until it molded. At 16, Madison crashed her car into a mailbox. Dad replaced it with a new one before the week was over. When I needed help with community college tuition, Mom said money was tight. The hierarchy was clear. Madison shone and I filled the shadows. By the time I became a nurse, I had grown accustomed to invisibility. I told myself it was fine, that my reward was in the quiet moments no one else saw. Grace Turner smiling weakly through her chemo fog, a mother whispering thank you as she collapsed into my arms. But every time I returned home to the Bennetts, my worth shrank to nothing more than a punchline. And yet, I still reached for them. Even on the day of my brain surgery, lying in a sterile room thousands of miles from home, I texted the family group chat, "Surgeries tomorrow, Methodist Hospital, the 15th of March, in case anyone wants to visit." Mom sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Madison didn't respond. Hannah wrote, "Sending prayers." Not one person booked a flight, not one even called. I remember waking up after surgery, groggy and terrified, and feeling Isabella Lopez's hand squeezing mine. "Where's your family, Carino?" she asked gently. "They're busy," I croaked, the lie automatic, as though covering for them had become part of my DNA. That night, as I stared at the blank hospital ceiling, the truth settled heavy in my chest. Something else needed to be cut out of my life just as urgently as the tumor had been. I didn't yet know the universe would hand me the scalpel. The 29th of March, 11:47 a.m. I sat slouched in Houston's airport, a paper envelope of discharge instructions heavy in my lap, the incision on my skull throbbing with each heartbeat. Pain medication dulled the edges, but not enough to hide the way the world tilted when I stood. My fingers shook as I reopened the group chat. "My flight lands in Seattle at 1 p.m. Can someone pick me up? Just had surgery and can't drive." The typing bubbles appeared instantly, 3 dots, 3 chances for someone to care. Mom's reply hit first, sharp and casual. "We're too busy today. Just take an Uber." Then Madison, fast as a blade. "Why don't you ever plan ahead?" Hannah. "Wish I could, but the kids have soccer." Uncle Richard. "Sorry, working." Aunt Valerie. "It's Saturday, Olivia." 17 people. 17 different ways of saying you are alone. I waited for one of them to reconsider. To type something like, "How did the surgery go? Are you okay?" But the only photo that followed was from Madison's centerpieces again, glossy roses versus peonies. The chat erupted with opinions, laughter, links to Pinterest boards. Not one word about the fact that their daughter, their sister, their cousin had just had brain surgery. I stared at my message, fossilized in silence, forgotten, like I wasn't even flesh and blood but a burden that could be dismissed with a swipe of a thumb. I typed, "Okay." The reply was immediate. "Don't be passive, aggressive, Olivia," Madison snapped. Mom chimed in, "We all have responsibilities. You should have arranged this earlier." Their words cut deeper than the surgeon's scalpel. The tumor had threatened my sight, but this indifference threatened something worse. My sense of being human. I switched off my phone, throat thick, eyes burning. The flight attendant saw my bracelet, the one with my name and procedure still inked on it. "Is someone meeting you in Seattle, honey?" she asked. "Yes," I lied. "Someone Island." The lie was a reflex now, the same one I'd used in Houston when Isabella Lopez asked about my family. "They're busy." The same lie I used with coworkers who wondered why my phone never lit up with messages during breaks. Lies are easier than explaining that you come from a family who can spend hours debating napkin colors but can't spare 10 minutes to ask if your brain surgery went well. As the plane took off, I pressed my head against the window. The glass was cool, the sky outside vast and blue, and I felt impossibly small. Memories crawled in with the engine's drone. The 4 a.m. drive I'd given Madison to catch her honeymoon flight. The weekends I'd spent assembling furniture for Mom's new condo, blisters forming on my palms while she critiqued my work. The countless emergencies that always seemed to land on my shoulders but never anyone else's. I had been the first to show up, the last to leave, the one who stayed even when no one stayed for me. When I finally dozed, my dreams twisted into fragments. Madison's laughter at the main table. Mom introducing me as the one who never settled down. Grace Turner, bald from chemo, looking up at me with eyes too wise for 7. Why are you always sad, Miss Olivia? Did someone hurt your feelings? Yes, I thought. Every day. When the plane began to descend into Seattle, my stomach tightened. I turned my phone back on. 43 new messages flashed across the screen, all about catering, flowers, music, not one about me. My request sat untouched, an abandoned relic. The plane touched down at 12:58. I stood slowly, gripping the seat for balance. Each step toward baggage claim felt like trudging through cement. And then I saw him. By the escalator, a tall man in a navy suit held a sign scrawled in black marker, Olivia Bennett. It couldn't be real. My vision blurred not from the tumor, but from disbelief. His face was familiar, one I'd only ever seen in hospital newsletters and the occasional article about healthcare leadership. Andrew Miller, CEO of St. Mary's Health System. The man whose signature decided budgets, whose presence filled boardrooms where governors waited for appointments. And here he was, at baggage claim, with a printer paper sign like a driver waiting for a VIP. For a second, I thought maybe the anesthesia had scrambled my brain, but then he lifted the sign higher, catching my gaze. His smile was steady, kind like someone who already knew how broken I felt and wasn't going to look away. Behind me, my phone pinged again. Another message about Madison's wedding linens. I clutched the handle of my bag. For the first time that day, the weight in my chest eased. Someone had come for me. The carousel whirred, luggage thudding onto the belt, travelers rushing forward like soldiers in a battle for possessions. But all I could see was the man with the paper sign. Andrew Miller. My throat tightened. The CEO of St. Mary's Health System, a man who helmed 12 hospitals and negotiated with senators, was standing in the middle of SeaTac baggage claim with a flimsy sheet of printer paper, my name scrawled across it like I was someone worth waiting for. For a moment, my legs wouldn't move. My body was still in Houston, weak, stitched, fragile. But the hollow inside me, the one my family had carved deeper with every dismissal, pulled me toward him. Olivia, he said simply, lowering the sign when I reached him. Not Miss Bennett, not Nurse Bennett, just Olivia. I opened my mouth, ready to deliver the reflexive line. I'm fine. But the look in his eyes stopped me. They weren't boardroom eyes, sharp and calculating. They were human. Concerned. Honestly, I whispered. I feel like someone scooped part of my brain out with a melon baller. A laugh low, warm slipped from him. That's the first honest thing I've heard you say about yourself in 3 years. Before I could respond, my knees wobbled. His hand steadied my elbow, firm but gentle. Not controlling. Not possessive protective. I read the group chat. Andrew said quietly as he took the handle of my suitcase from me. Donna sent it. She was worried. Heat flooded my face. The humiliation wasn't just private anymore, it was documented, witnessed. My family was busy, I muttered, the excuse automatic, the lie I'd been telling my whole life. Busy? His voice sharpened, but only slightly. Centerpieces are not more important than brain surgery. We walked toward the sliding doors, his stride measured to match my slow pace. Outside, a black town car idled, driver waiting. I don't need all this, I said when I spotted the car, guilt twisting in me. You didn't have to. I did, Andrew cut in firmly. No one should walk out of brain surgery into silence. Not you. Not anyone. The driver opened the door. Inside, a small cooler sat on the seat. Coconut water, my favorite. A bottle of the exact pain medication I'd been prescribed. even a pillow for my head. My chest clenched. How did you? I called Dr. Cole, he said. We did our residencies together. He told me about the nurse with the family who never showed up. I swallowed hard. The idea that two men with surgical hands had spoken about me, the forgotten nurse, the ghost daughter, as if I were worth discussing, worth worrying about, felt almost unbearable. The drive blurred in streaks of rain against the window. Andrew spoke quietly, not as a CEO, but as someone who had been watching. You give everything to everyone, Olivia. The children, the parents, even your coworkers. But who takes care of you? I take care of myself, I said automatically. No, he corrected. You survive by yourself. That's not the same thing. By the time the car pulled in front of my apartment, my fridge had already been stocked. A nurse had been scheduled to check on me daily. A bouquet of fresh sunflowers sat on my counter with a card. From the pediatric ward, Grace insisted. It's too much, I protested, voice cracking. This is what family is supposed to do, Andrew said softly. Real family. The kind you choose. His words sank into me deeper than any scalpel ever could. That night, as the pain medication pulled me into fog, I saw the envelope on my coffee table, his neat handwriting across it. Open when you're feeling better. But before I could drift into sleep, my phone lit up 48 missed calls, 17 voicemails, 132 text messages. The Bennetts had found out who picked me up. Morning seeped through the blinds in pale stripes when I finally stirred. My head still ached, the incision ached more. But what made my chest throb hardest was the frantic glow of my phone on the nightstand. 48 missed calls. 17 voicemails. 132 text messages. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, that my family had finally remembered I existed, but then I scrolled. Mom, why was Andrew Miller at the airport? Call me immediately. Madison, the Andrew Miller? The billionaire? Aunt Valerie, how do you know him? Uncle Richard. Olivia, answer the phone right now. Hannah, this is so embarrassing. People at church are asking questions. Each message made my stomach tighten. Overnight, I had transformed from invisible to indispensable, not because of my surgery, not because I was alive, but because a powerful man had lifted a paper sign with my name on it. The voicemails were worse. Mom's voice escalated with each call. Call me back, Olivia. Right now. You're humiliating us. Why was he there? What did you tell him about us? You've embarrassed this family beyond repair. Madison's messages were sharper, venom masked as desperation. Don't play games, Olivia. You're doing this for attention, aren't you? Robert's firm is trying to get Andrew's business. Do you realize what's at stake? By call 17, Mom's voice cracked with something that almost sounded like fear. Sweetheart, please. Just bring him to the wedding. We need to make this right. Sweetheart. She hadn't called me that in years. I dropped the phone onto the blanket and stared at the ceiling. My life-saving surgery hadn't earned me a single ride to the airport, but Andrew Miller's presence had unleashed a tidal wave of panic. The irony was nauseating. I shuffled to the kitchen, stitches tugging with each step, and there it was, the bouquet of sunflowers Andrew had arranged from the pediatric ward. Grace Turner's shaky crayon handwriting on the card. Get better, Miss Olivia. My hero. The flowers were real. The calls were noise. Still, the noise was loud. Madison's texts came in rapid fire. Is he single? Could you introduce us at the wedding? Don't mess this up for me, Olivia. Robert's entire career depends on this. I pressed the phone face down on the counter. For once, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. That evening, my supervisor Donna Hughes called. Her voice was warm, knowing. So, Andrew Miller canceled a meeting with the governor to pick you up? It's not a big deal, I muttered. It is, she countered. He doesn't cancel meetings. Not for anyone. I thought of the envelope on my coffee table. Open when you're feeling better. I wasn't ready yet, but I knew whatever was inside wasn't small. Meanwhile, the Bennetts scrambled. Mom called 17 times in 1 hour. Madison switched between rage and pleading. Even relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted lunch, a catch-up, a coffee. But it wasn't me they wanted. It was Andrew. For decades, I had been the family ghost, good enough to loan money, good enough to babysit emergencies, but never good enough to matter. Now, in the space of one airport pickup, I had become their currency. And in 5 days, I would walk into Madison's wedding carrying the one thing they couldn't control, the truth. The countdown to Madison Clark's wedding ticked louder with every hour. 5 days. That was all that separated me from the glittering ballroom where I'd be paraded or humiliated depending on how useful my family decided I was. They had already begun shifting the script. Mom's voice on the phone was suddenly honey-sweet, the kind of tone she used with country club friends when she wanted something. "Olivia, sweetheart, we've rearranged the seating. You'll be at the main table now." Then, the main table. After years at the kids' table, suddenly I was worthy of sitting with the adults. Not because I'd survived brain surgery. Not because I was head nurse of an oncology unit. But because Andrew Miller had carried my suitcase. "What changed?" I asked flatly. "Nothing," Mom replied too quickly. "Family should sit together." Family. The word felt like a costume they dusted off only when the right audience was watching. Meanwhile, Madison's text grew more desperate. "Bring Andrew as your +1. Everyone wants to meet him. Robert says it could secure his firm's contract. Don't be childish, Olivia. This is bigger than you. Bigger than me." That was the story of my life. The hypocrisy stung like salt in a wound. I thought back to last Christmas, when I had begged to bring a date. Mom had waved me off with a dismissive flick. "We're keeping it small, just immediate family." But now, apparently, Andrew Miller had an open invitation. I looked at the unopened envelope on my coffee table. Its weight was heavier than paper. Inside, I knew, was something that would change everything. But I wasn't ready to look. Not yet. For now, I carried the knowledge that my family's sudden affection wasn't about me at all. It was about proximity to power. They had discarded me when I was weak, and now they scrambled because a man with influence had chosen not to. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. On the counter, the sunflowers from Grace Turner had begun to tilt toward the light. Her childish scrawl still glowed on the card. "You're my hero." I traced the words with my finger and felt the sting of tears. This was real love. The kind that didn't calculate return on investment. The phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Madison. This one sharper. "If you embarrass me at my wedding, Olivia, I swear you'll regret it. Don't you dare make this about you." As if I ever had. For 34 years, I had been the supporting character in Madison's story. The one who paid deposits, who drove at dawn, who clapped from the shadows. But a shift was building inside me. The kind of shift that brain surgery and betrayal both carve out. Clarity. That night, I dreamed of sitting at the kids' table again, a paper plate balanced on my lap while laughter erupted at the main table. Only this time, the dream ended differently. In the dream, I stood up. I walked away. When I woke, dawn light poured across the envelope. My hands shook as I picked it up. "Open when you're feeling better," Andrew had written. My stitches still ached, my heart still raw, but something inside me whispered, "Now." I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Street Mary's letterhead crisp and official, pending board approval. My breath caught. The title beneath made my vision blur. Chief Nursing Officer Olivia Bennett. At 34, I had been chosen to lead an entire department. The youngest in the hospital's history. A salary that dwarfed anything Madison or Ethan could boast. A responsibility I had earned not by birthright, not by privilege, but by years of sleepless nights, of tears shed beside dying children, of strength forged in silence. My family thought Andrew Miller's presence at the airport was the story. They had no idea the real story was this. In 5 days, under the chandeliers of Madison's perfect ballroom, the truth would walk in wearing my name. And for once, I wouldn't sit quietly. The Fairmont Grand Hotel glittered like something out of a magazine spread the evening of Madison's wedding. Chandeliers dripped light across marble floors, a string quartet filled the air with elegant notes, and tables groaned under the weight of floral centerpieces that cost more than a nurse's monthly paycheck. 200 guests in silk gowns and tailored suits milled about, champagne in hand. To them, this was Madison Clark's perfect night. To me, it was a stage set for public execution. I had been upgraded from the kids' table to the main table, a move so transparent it was laughable. Mom smiled tightly as she adjusted the placement cards. "See, Olivia? Family sits together." Her tone dripped with false warmth, as though rearranging chairs could erase decades of exile. Madison, radiant in her designer gown, shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Where's Andrew?" she hissed. "Don't tell me he isn't coming." "He couldn't make it," I said evenly. Her smile faltered, the practiced mask cracking. "You're lying." The string quartet swelled as the reception began. Guests toasted, laughed, clinked glasses. I sat with my hands folded, the stitches in my head pulsing with every fake smile Mom forced at her society friends. Then she stood, champagne flute in hand, and tapped the microphone. The room quieted. "I want to toast my beautiful daughter, Madison," she began, her voice ringing with pride. "She's everything a mother could want: successful, brilliant, about to become a partner at her firm." The crowd murmured approval. I braced myself, already knowing what came next. "And of course," Mom continued, her eyes sliding to me, "there's Olivia. She's in healthcare." A pause. A heavy, damning pause. "It's important to have realistic expectations," she added sweetly. "Not everyone can be a Madison. Some people are meant for simpler things." Laughter rippled softly around the room. My cheeks burned hot, but my body was ice. Then came the knife twist. "Olivia, sweetheart, Robert's business partner needs your seat. You don't mind moving, do you?" 200 faces turned toward me. Madison smirked from her bride's throne, Ethan's arm draped smugly across her chair. My legs trembled as I stood. Not from the surgery this time, from rage. "Of course," I said quietly. The walk across the ballroom felt endless. Every step was a humiliation. Every pair of eyes a witness. Madison's laughter rang out behind me, cruel and triumphant. "There's space at table 12 with the plus ones," she called, voice dripping with mockery. The plus ones table. My punishment, in front of 200 people, for daring to exist in Madison's spotlight. I pulled out a chair, hands trembling, and sat among strangers who shifted awkwardly, pretending not to see the spectacle. My chest ached so badly I thought the stitches might split. And then, the ballroom doors opened. A ripple went through the crowd. Whispers buzzed like bees. "Is that Andrew Miller?" He strode in wearing a tuxedo that looked as though it had been cut from midnight itself. His presence filled the space before he even spoke. Eyes darted, voices hushed. This was no ordinary guest. Andrew didn't glance at the chandeliers or the flowers. He walked straight toward me. "Sorry I'm late," he said, voice carrying to every corner of the room. The board meeting ran long. We had something important to announce. Mom's champagne glass nearly slipped from her hand. Madison's smile froze, her knuckles whitening around her bouquet. Andrew turned calmly to the crowd. "Actually, this is perfect timing. I'd like to make an announcement." Luck. The ballroom stilled. 200 guests leaned forward. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted out. And for the first time in my life, I realized the stage was no longer theirs. It was mine. Andrew Miller didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The kind of authority he carried didn't come from volume, it came from the weight of a man who'd never once had to beg to be heard. "Good evening," he said, his gaze sweeping across the glittering ballroom. "I'm Andrew Miller, CEO of Street Mary's Health System. I'm here tonight for one reason." He paused, letting the anticipation thicken, to celebrate Olivia Bennett. The name landed like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Champagne flutes froze midair. Mom's face drained of color. Madison's painted smile cracked into something brittle. Andrew continued smoothly, his eyes finding mine. 3 hours ago, the board of Street Mary's unanimously approved a historic appointment. Olivia Bennett is now the youngest chief nursing officer in our 150-year history. A murmur tore through the guests like a wave. Someone dropped a glass. The sound shattered against marble, as sharp as the truth now hanging in the air. Andrew's voice warmed. Her salary will be $250,000 annually, with full benefits and a signing bonus I won't disclose in polite company. He let the figure sink in, then added, "But more important than numbers is this. Last month, Olivia spent 17 hours straight with a dying child. She's learned multiple languages to comfort families in their darkest hours. She created a fund out of her own paycheck to help parents afford parking while their children received treatment." He looked directly at Mom, whose lips trembled as she clutched her glass like a lifeline. "That little nursing job you dismissed? Olivia oversees 200 nurses and manages a $15 million budget. She's published in 3 medical journals. She is not small, she is not invisible. She is extraordinary." The silence that followed was so heavy it bowed the chandeliers. Then Andrew's tone sharpened, steel under velvet. "The minor procedure you all ignored was brain surgery. A tumor that could have killed her. She went through it alone, because her family was too busy with wedding centerpieces." The room shifted. 200 guests, friends, colleagues, acquaintances stared at the Bennetts like they were seeing them for the first time. Andrew wasn't finished. He turned to Ethan Ward, whose face had flushed an ugly red. "And as for Robert's firm," he smirked faintly, deliberate, "we've declined their pitches for 3 years. Street Mary's doesn't work with people who confuse values with vanity. We only partner with those who understand family the real kind." The blow landed clean and devastating. Ethan looked as though the marble floor had opened beneath him. Madison gripped his arm, her knuckles white, fury flashing in her eyes. Andrew handed the microphone back to the stunned MC and walked straight to me. "Ready to go?" he asked quietly, as if the whole room hadn't just tilted on its axis. I could barely speak. My throat burned, my heart hammered, but when I looked up at him, something inside me steadied. "Yes," I whispered. The ballroom erupted not in laughter this time, but in applause. It started tentative, then swelled, filling every corner. Some clapped for Andrew. Some clapped for me. But all of them knew they had just witnessed a reckoning. Mom's glass slipped from her hand. It didn't shatter. It rolled across the tablecloth and stopped at her lap, trembling like the rest of her. For the first time in my life, she looked at me not as a daughter to dismiss, but as someone who had escaped her grasp. And she knew it. The ballroom was still vibrating with applause when Andrew handed the microphone back to the MC. But before the poor man could recover his composure, I stood. "Wait," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Maybe because 200 people wanted to hear what I'd say now. Maybe because silence always yields to truth when it's finally spoken. I walked to the front, my heels echoing against the marble. Andrew stepped aside, his presence steady at my shoulder like a lighthouse that promised I wouldn't be swallowed by the storm. I took the microphone. For once, I wasn't trembling. "Family," I began, my eyes sweeping across faces that had laughed at me for decades, "is supposed to show up." The words landed heavy, simple as stones. When I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, I texted 17 people in this family. Not one visited me in Houston. Not one called to ask if I was scared. Not one checked if I survived the surgery. 17 phones in this chat, 17 variations of no. Gasps punctured the quiet. Mom's book club friends exchanged horrified looks. Ethan shifted in his seat, as if he wanted to sink into the floor. When I landed back in Seattle after brain surgery, I continued. I asked for a ride. Just a ride. What I got was, take an Uber. Centerpieces were more important than my life. No. I let that sink in. 200 people sat frozen. I turned to Madison. She flinched, but her jaw stayed locked. "Over the years, I gave you $15,000. My house down payment. You never paid me back. But when you needed money for this wedding, I gave more, because Mom said, family helps family. Funny how that road always went one way." Her eyes narrowed, venom bubbling. But for once, her words caught in her throat. I turned to the crowd again. "I've been at the kids' table since I was 30. Introduced as the divorced one, the single one, the one with a little nursing job. But while you were laughing, I was holding dying children. While you were choosing napkins, I was saving lives. While you were calling me a burden, I was becoming the youngest department chief in Street Mary's history. The air cracked with tension. I could feel the shift guests recoiling not from me, but from the Bennetts. Mom reached for the microphone, her hand trembling. Olivia, please. I pulled it closer. My voice sharpened. Number, you don't get to speak over me anymore. The silence that followed was electric. I looked at her, my voice steady, cold. You want to know what people will think? They'll think you're the mother who abandoned her daughter after brain surgery. And they'll be right. A collective gasp swept the ballroom. Mom's carefully curated reputation cracked in an instant. I handed the microphone back to Andrew, but before I stepped down, I faced Madison one last time. She was seething, mascara smudged, fists clenched around her bouquet. You asked me not to make this about me, I said softly. Only loud enough for the first few rows to hear. I never have. But tonight, for the first time in my life, it finally island. Applause surged again, this time raw, unscripted, unstoppable. Some guests clapped tentatively, others fiercely. Even the servers joined in, hands red from force. Mom's tears spilled. But I knew those tears. They weren't for me. They were for the wreckage of her image. Madison's glare burned hotter than the chandeliers. But behind it was fear. Ethan muttered something sharp into her ear, his jaw tight with humiliation. For the first time in 34 years, I wasn't the ghost in my family's story. I was the fire. And I wasn't going to let them smother it. The applause echoed like thunder, rattling every chandelier in the ballroom. Some guests clapped politely. Others rose to their feet, their palms red with conviction. The sound wasn't just for me, it was for every person who'd ever been silenced at their own family table. I placed the microphone back on its stand. My heart was steady now, no longer pounding with fear but pulsing with something else, freedom. Mom staggered forward, mascara streaking her cheeks. Olivia, sweetheart, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? Her voice cracked on the word sweetheart, the same word she'd only used again when Andrew Miller entered the picture. I did tell you, I said evenly. You just never listened. Madison lurched to her feet, gown swishing angrily around her. This is my wedding, she spat. You've ruined everything. You always have to make yourself the victim. I laughed. An actual laugh, sharp and clean. No, Madison. For 34 years, I've been your scapegoat. Tonight, I'm just telling the truth. Ethan Ward tugged at her arm, his face twisted with fury. I caught his lips forming the words, "You didn't tell me she knew Andrew Miller." The shame burning in his expression told me everything. This wasn't just about family pride. It was about money. Contracts. Power. I turned toward the exit. 200 pairs of eyes followed me, whispers flaring in my wake. Chief nursing officer. $250,000 salary. Brain surgery alone. They made her sit at the kids' table. Mom lunged forward, blocking my path. If you walk out that door, Olivia, you are no longer welcome in this family. I met her gaze, unflinching. I haven't been welcome in this family for years. You just needed me too much to admit it. Her face crumpled. I'll cut you out of the will. I almost smiled. What will? The mortgaged house? The savings you poured into Madison's first wedding? Keep it. I don't need it. The ballroom gasped. Madison's eyes went wild, her voice shrill. You can't just leave. What about family? I shook my head gently. Family shows up when you need them. Andrew flew 2,000 miles. You couldn't drive 20 minutes. The staff clapped then, the servers, the bartenders, even the coat check girl. A young waiter passed by and whispered, My mom's a nurse. Thank you. That one sentence meant more than all the false apologies in the room combined. Andrew stepped beside me, unmovable as stone. Olivia doesn't need any of you, he told the room, voice like steel. She never did. You needed her, her money, her kindness, her silence. That ends tonight. The crowd shifted. People pulled back from my family, like a tide retreating from rotting debris. The Bennetts stood exposed, stripped of their glittering facade. I took one last look at Madison, mascara streaked, clutching her bouquet like it might hold her life together. Congratulations on your wedding, I said. Don't worry about paying me back. Consider it my gift and my goodbye. The room parted as Andrew opened the door for me. 200 guests watched as I stepped into the hall, my head high. The whispers swirled behind me, but I didn't look back. Some bridges aren't meant to be crossed again. Some are meant to burn, lighting the way forward. Outside, the night air was crisp, the city lights sharp against the sky. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. Andrew looked at me as the driver opened the car door. You don't belong back there, he said quietly. I know, I replied. I never did. As the car pulled away, the ballroom receded into the distance, a golden cage I had finally left behind. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, lighting up with messages I didn't bother to read. Instead, I picked up Grace Turner's sunflower card from my bag, her shaky crayon letters still glowing in the dim light. You're my hero. For the first time, I believed it. The girl at the kids' table was gone. In her place stood the chief nursing officer of Street. Mary's, a woman who had survived brain surgery, abandonment, and betrayal, and walked out stronger. That night I chose myself, and it was the best choice I had ever made. Life lessons from Olivia's story. There are stories we hear that stay with us, not because they are glamorous, but because they peel back the layers of what it means to be human. Olivia Bennett's journey from being abandoned by her own family after brain surgery to standing tall as the chief nursing officer of one of the nation's largest hospital systems is not just a personal victory. It is a mirror reflecting the silent struggles so many carry, the invisible labor we give, and the courage it takes to finally choose ourselves. Family is more than blood. One of the hardest truths Olivia's story teaches us is that family is not automatically defined by DNA. Blood gives you relatives. Loyalty gives you family. 17 people in her family chat had the chance to show up when she needed them most. None did. Their absence didn't make Olivia less deserving of love. Instead, it highlighted a universal reality. Real family are the people who show up when the world turns its back. For Olivia, it wasn't her mother or sister who came to the airport. It was Andrew Miller, a man who saw her humanity when her own relatives refused to. The lesson? Stop chasing validation from people who repeatedly fail to show up. Recognize those who stand by you, friends, mentors, colleagues, even strangers, and call them family. 2. Self-worth should never be outsourced. For years, Olivia believed she had to earn love. She gave money, time, labor, and silence in exchange for scraps of recognition. Every no from her family was another cut. But she kept hoping the next yes would finally make her enough. How many of us do the same? We work overtime to be good enough for parents, siblings, or partners who have already decided our role in their story. We tolerate being overlooked, underappreciated, even humiliated because we think maybe one more sacrifice will buy their approval. Olivia's turning point came when she realized love should not be earned like a paycheck. Love is supposed to be given freely. The moment you stop begging for worth is the moment you start living with dignity. 3. Boundaries are acts of survival. Boundaries are not walls of cruelty. They are gates of protection. Olivia had spent decades saying yes to everything, paying her sister's wedding deposits, giving rides at dawn, cleaning up her family's chaos because she thought that was what good daughters did. In return, when she asked for the smallest favor after a life-threatening surgery, she was told, "Take an Uber." Her eventual no wasn't selfish, it was survival. Walking out of that wedding was not a betrayal of family. It was a reclamation of self. The lesson for us? Boundaries are not optional in toxic environments. They are oxygen. Without them, you suffocate under the weight of everyone else's demands. 4. Silence protects abusers, not victims. For years, Olivia bit her tongue. She let her family introduce her as the single one with the little nursing job. She accepted being exiled to the kids' table. She swallowed humiliation at every brunch and holiday, but silence only protected the people who hurt her. The night she took the microphone at Madison's wedding was the night her silence broke. In front of 200 people, she told the truth. About the tumor, the neglect, the money, the abandonment. It wasn't revenge, it was liberation. Too many of us are taught that keeping quiet keeps the peace. But peace built on silence is just oppression with better lighting. Speaking up may cause ripples, even explosions, but it's the only way to end cycles of abuse. Woo. Chosen families heal the wounds of broken ones. Olivia walked out of the Bennetts' lives that night, but she didn't walk alone. She had the pediatric ward staff who ate lunch in her hospital room, the children who called her a hero, Donna Hughes who believed in her, and Andrew Miller who showed up at baggage claim when no one else did. Her story proves that chosen families, the people who see us, respect us, and stand with us, can be stronger than the ones we're born into. And often, they're the ones who help us remember we are worthy of love in the first place. 6. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. Perhaps the deepest lesson comes from the moment Olivia finally said, "I don't need you to fix this, because I don't need you anymore." Choosing yourself is not betrayal. It is not cruelty. It is not selfish. It is survival, it is healing, and it is the foundation for every meaningful relationship that will follow. For years, Olivia chose everyone else. That night, she chose herself. And by choosing herself, she stepped into a life where she was no longer invisible, no longer diminished, no longer begging. She became unforgettable to others, but most importantly, to herself. Final reflection. Olivia Bennett's story is extreme, but not unique. Every day, people sit at kids' tables of their own lives, ignored, belittled, used. Every day, people send quiet texts for help that go unanswered. Every day, people lie, saying, "I'm fine," when what they mean is, "I'm drowning." The lesson we take from Olivia's journey is this: you cannot force others to see you, but you can refuse to stay invisible. Family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shows up. Love isn't about what you earn. It's about what's given freely. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're survival. Silence isn't peace, it's complicity. And above all, choosing yourself is never selfish. It's necessary. So if you're watching this and you feel invisible in your own life, remember Olivia's story. Remember the night she walked out of that ballroom with her head high, leaving behind those who had made her small. Remember that she found family not in those who shared her last name, but in those who showed up when it mattered. And remember this: it's never too late to push back your chair, stand up from the kids' table, and claim your rightful place in your own story.